water got no get enemy, Felakuti. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. For our last segment, we turn to a new look at the severity of water contamination here in the United States. An investigation by the New York Times has found chemical companies have violated the Clean Water Act more than 500,000 times in the last 5 years. Most of the violations have gone unpunished, with state regulators taking significant action in just 3% of all cases. Although some of the cases entailed minor violations, a majority of 60% were deemed to be in significant noncompliance. These cases are of the most serious and include the dumping of cancer-causing chemicals or failing to measure or report pollution. An estimated 1 in 10 Americans has been exposed to drinking water that has dangerous chemicals or falls short of federal standards. 40% of the nation's community water systems violated the Safe Drinking Water Act, and at least once exposing over 23 million people to potential danger. The investigation was published 2 days after the Environmental Protection Agency announced it would freeze permits for 79 mountaintop removal sites pending a review of their compliance with the Clean Water Act. The move affects mines in 4 states: Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio, and Tennessee. Charles Duhigg is the New York Times reporter who is carrying out this investigation. His article appeared in Sunday's edition of the New York Times. It's called "Clean Water Laws Are Neglected at a Cost in Suffering." Charles Duhigg joins me here in the Firehouse studio. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you so much for having me.
A remarkable expose. Just lay it out for us.
Well, we spent about 10 months collecting records from every single state in the EPA, trying to figure out exactly what was going on with the nation's waters. And what we discovered was that the Clean Water Act was passed about almost 4 decades ago with the intent of giving regulators the power to monitor what goes into our waterways and then punish people who violate their permits. And everyone who dumps something into a waterway has to have a permit. And what we found is that only about 3% of people who violate their permits ever get punished. And so, somewhat unsurprisingly, the rate of violations has gone up significantly because companies and workplaces know that they can break the Clean Water Act without getting punished for it.
You begin your piece in West Virginia.
That's right. We focus on West Virginia for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a microcosm of the problems that have been around this issue. It's a national issue, and states all over the country confront this. But in West Virginia in particular, you see a real struggle and tension between industries, most particularly coal extraction, which is West Virginia's largest industry, and the environmental priorities of people who want to protect waterways. And so there's a number of communities in West Virginia that are really suffering because their water has been, they claim, ruined by the practices of nearby coal companies. And the state agency has, the environmental agency has been less vigorous in protecting it.
Tell us about Jennifer Hallmansey.
Jennifer's she's a mother of 2 kids in right outside Charleston, West Virginia, which is the state capital. And so this isn't sort of, some dark corner of Appalachia. Around her home are mountains that have been mined for coal for years. One of the things that coal companies do is when they extract coal, they wash it. And the water, and they put chemicals in it to take out the impurities. The waste that's left over, the water, is called sludge or slurry, and it contains all these dissolved minerals and chemicals. They put those in these big ponds called impoundments, or they pump them back underground into abandoned mine shafts. And what Jennifer claims, as well as her community, is that the water has filtered out of those mine shafts and those big lagoons and destroyed the local water supplies, which they use for drinking.
So she and 264 neighbors sued?
That's right. That's right. They've sued the 9 coal companies asking for compensation.
And where do the state regulators stand in her case and then go national?
In her case, state regulators said that they cannot find sufficient scientific evidence to show that what the coal companies are pumping underground has ruined the water supplies of local residents. That's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that the coal companies themselves admit that they've broken the law. These companies around Jennifer's home, they can't put stuff underground that violates the Safe Drinking Water Act. And they file reports each month saying what's in their injections. And we know from their own reports that that has broken the Safe Drinking Water Act. They've been against the law, and they told the state that every month. But the state didn't do anything. They didn't punish them. In fact, the state says that they basically overlooked the records, and they didn't even realize that these guys were breaking the law. And that's what's happening all across the country, is that every single month or every single week or every single quarter, companies send in reports and they say, this is what I'm dumping into a river, or this is what I'm dumping into a pond. And it shows that they're breaking the law. But in most cases, regulators either don't look at the report, or even if they see the report, they're not doing anything to punish them.
And it's not just coal companies. I mean, the figures you're talking about here are astounding. Chemical companies have violated the Clean Water Act 500,000 times.
Right.
Most of the violations go unpunished.
And just to be, it's not just chemical companies, it's facilities of any kind. So a lot of the polluters are, for instance, gas stations, dry cleaning stores, wastewater treatment plants that are run by New York City or any other city. These are all facilities that under the Clean Water Act are supposed to limit the toxins and other chemicals and pollutants that they dump into rivers or lakes or ponds. And they measure each week or each month what they're dumping, and they tell regulators, but regulators just aren't acting on that.
How did over 23 million people get exposed to unsafe drinking water?
So what we did is we looked at all of the numbers from the EPA and from the USGS, the Geological Survey, on how many water districts or wells had violated health-based standards or weren't in conformance with health-based standards because wells aren't regulated for the most part under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And that's the figure that we arrived at, is that all of these people were exposed to water that either contained bacteria, parasites, viruses, and in fact, one study says that almost 20 million people a year get ill just from consuming those types of things in their water. And then on the other hand, that's just sort of the bugs that we know about in water. There's also all these chemicals and toxins, carcinogens that can build up in your body and maybe don't make you sick right away, but over decades can accumulate and cause things we know like cancers, organ failures, and other really scary diseases.
Now, you have compiled, with the Times, a national database of water pollution violations.
Right.
Explain how people can get access to this.
If you go to